Yogena chittasya padena vacham malam sharirasya cha vaidikena yopakarottam pravaram muninam patanchalim pranchaliranatosmi studve patanchalim vyasam shankaram cha munitrayam kartru sutrasya bhashyasya krimat vivaranasya cha. So, we have been discussing the 5 types of vrittis or mental modifications. So we already explained at the very beginning, the purpose of yoga is chitta vritti nirodha, which means cessation or dissolution of our misidentification with the emerging modifications. Our sense of self gets identified with whatever modifications arise in our mind as a result of different experiences involving mind and the 5 senses of perception. In the 5th sutra, Patanjali said, Vrittayaha panchadaya klishta klishtaha. Vrittis are modifications of 5-fold. In the 6th sutra, he said, Pramana viparya vikalpa nidra smrtayaha. These 5 types of 5 general categories of vrittis or mental modifications are related to our direct perception. We may come in contact with different objects. We may come to know of different objects, either through direct perception, by seeing, by audio interaction, or by reading a book, which is verbal testimony, sometimes through inference from one experience in the past. We come to certain conclusions. And if a similar experience arises again, then we try to associate the present experience with some past experience, and through inference we come to know certain things, we come to certain conclusions. And analogy or comparison. The second vritti, viparya, which is related to some kind of false cognition, or vikalpa, just words without any corresponding object, sleep and smriti or memory. All this we have already explained. I am just trying to recapitulate what we already discussed. And in the last class we defined nidra or sleep, deep sleep. And then again, towards the end of the last class, we try to discuss the dynamics, the psychological implications of memory or smriti. That I will take up once more, and then we will come to the next topics today. So in the 11th sutra, Patanjali defines what is smriti or memory. The sutra is this: anubhuta vishaya asampramoshaha vrittihi smritihi. This is those who have got the sutra. I will explain briefly the Sanskrit part, then I will explain, give a free interpretation and expanded explanation. Anubhuta vishaya asampramoshaha. The idea is this: when we have already some experience in the past, we have had some experience, and then when we try to remember that, when we remember exactly without any increase or decrease, without any modification, that is called memory. Memory means, it's a simple description. Memory also creates smritis. I can give examples. Why do we get obsessed with certain tendencies, impressions and characteristics. Now, suppose we see an object or we have an experience. As I said earlier, it creates a tendency, it creates ripples, modifications, and then samskaras and impressions in our mind, which remain there, mean the residual part of an experience. An experience creates a vritti or a modification in the mind, and after that experience is over, it leaves a mark in our mental system which remains there, not only for years, but for ages. Some of our activities which cannot be explained in terms of any earlier experiences or memories, but they are so deep-rooted, so we cannot explain except in the light of impressions, what I call samskaras, that we gathered or accumulated in previous life. We feel that we can't but behave in a particular manner. We try, suddenly there is a disturbance. People are born with certain characteristics. Sometimes when they reach a particular level, psychiatrists may call it an obsession. But that is, obsession is a word only when that characteristic reaches a pathological obsessive dimension. I'm not referring to that. Because you know why I'm referring to some terms in a psychiatry. Because many thinkers try to dismiss some of Patanjali's ideas in terms of modern psychiatry. For example, samskaras they explain in terms of obsessions which are the result of some childhood experiences. But there are many tendencies and impressions. The way we behave, the way we act ideas from external world, and the way we receive and observe and practice. There are many things which modern psychiatry, pathological psychiatry, psychology cannot explain. No, they are called samskaras. We behave in a particular manner, projecting or presenting one samskara, and when that samskara becomes predominant, all other samskaras are submerged. As I said earlier, the main contribution of Patanjali in this area is the very concept of samskaras. Indian psychology projected this idea. Samskaras. In Western psychology, the subtle distinction between a vritti and a samskara is not made. Because all human activities and impressions are analyzed within the range of this life. So, smriti is defined as coming to the surface of an experience from the past without any change, without any decrease or increase, without any, as such, it is called smriti, without any difference. Now, so, as I said, Patanjali has described these 5 types of vrittis. Our mind is full of tendencies, impressions, vrittis functioning as samskaras, and samskaras constituting human character and habits, and these habits again determining the way we act, and the way we act again accumulating, enriching or impoverishing samskaras like that. So chittam or mindset is full of samskaras, both good and bad. Now, how to get rid of this problem? How to accomplish nirodha, as it is said? In the beginning, Patanjali defined yogaha chitta vritti nirodha, cessation of our misidentification of sense of self with emerging modifications in the mindset. We forget what we are, then we identify ourselves with a momentary impulse coming out of a momentary experience. People lose their temper. People get anxious. People become upset, distressed, and forget themselves and act and behave. Because for the moment, they completely identify with a momentary impulse. That impulse is nothing but a strong vritti. If we can look upon that vritti as a witness, that's the purpose of yoga, then we won't be affected by these samskara, by these vrittis, these modifications. We will stop misidentifying ourselves with the modifications emerging in the mindset. Now, how to achieve this goal? It's a famous sutra. It comes in 12th sutra of the Samadhipada. Abhyasa vairagyabhyam tat nirodha. How to achieve this nirodha, cessation, stopping these emerging modifications. Two important methods are clearly stated here. One is abhyasa, the other is vairagya. These are two methods. So these need a detailed explanation. In your book, sometimes you may come across abhyasa vairagya bhyam tad nirodha. Two methods are given in this particular sutra. But elsewhere, Patanjali has recommended another method. So those who are interested in this subject in greater detail should add another element, Ishvara Pranidhanatva, which is a sutra which comes in the same pada, but 23rd sutra of the same chapter. Ishvara Pranidhanatva, or through devotion to God. So how to get rid of these mental modifications? Three methods. One is abhyasa, the other is vairagya, the third one is Ishvara Pranidhana. Abhyasa means repeated practice. It will be explained in the coming sutras. Constant effort. Constant effort. It should be continued with intensity, continuity, and also a great respect and love. See, unless we have a great devotion to yogic practice, we will not be able to continue it with intensity. If anything that we do, if we respect, honor, or we have an intense inner love for that work, for that ideal, then we will be able to continue our engagement, our involvement in that work with intensity for a long time, and we'll be able to repeat it. So, abhyasa means repeated practice again and again. Abhyasa is explained in another sutra. So, the second part is vairagya. Vairagya also will be explained in detail. Vairagya means all moral teachings that you get from books. Now, as I said earlier, practice of yoga requires a very important condition. Some fundamental moral principles we must be able to practice. That's called vairagya. In general, vairagya has got 3 levels of evolution. So vairagya should mean all mental teachings, moral teaching, mental, moral, physical teachings. All moral, ethical teachings related to mental and physical life. That is vairagya. Now, these moral teachings block the flow of energy, which is called chitta nadi, towards the evil and direct them towards the good. So, to give an example, if we want to practice concentration with intensity, dedication, with a great application, as I said earlier, we naturally generate a lot of physical and lot more of mental faculties. The ability to think, to speak, to act, to work. The body naturally generates new skills. Some of the dormant skills are hyperactivated. New skills are created. Energy levels increase. We become very dynamic. Now, at this time, there will be a tendency for the mental energy to suddenly increase and take whatever direction is available at that stage. So this mental energy, skills, dynamism should be directed towards good purposes, good ideas, towards good. Otherwise, they may flow towards the evil. In the yoga system, it's called Chitta Nadi. Nadi is basically a kind of inner, subtle nervous system, which gets suddenly activated. So Patanjali later on will explain some 8 important supernatural powers. Really speaking, they are not supernatural. They are scientific. They can be scientifically explained. Supernatural is not a correct expression, actually speaking. All these skills will be naturally created, generated within the system. So, but these skills can be directed towards spiritually helpful channels only if we practice vairagya along with abhyasa. So abhyasa means practice with continuity, intensity, and with great dedication and application. But if that abhyasa, repeated and intense action, is not practiced without vairagya, vairagya should also ultimately be explained in terms of total rejection, renunciation of material, mundane powers and desires. But along with that, it also means all the associated with moral principles and ethical ideas. So, Patanjali will explain later that these yogic practices, abhyasa, should be performed along with vairagya. So, once we achieve this, we can achieve nirodha or cessation. The third important characteristic is Ishvara Pranidhana. And psychologically, this is very important. Ishvara Pranidhana literally means devotion to God. It also could mean a kind of resignation to God. Now, suppose we have undertaken some task, not necessarily yoga. This engagement, this activity could create anxiety when we are involved in that action. When the result is not up to the expectation, it could create distress and disappointment. When the result is beyond expectation, it could lead to jubilation. We may get overjoyed. So all these are related to whatever we undertake. That is true with yoga also. So when we practice yoga, if we have devotion to a transcendental, positive, spiritual ideal in the form of God, who creates His world and who sustains, who is the totality of all good qualities. Of course, here Ishvara doesn't necessarily mean Brahman or Atman or Vedanta philosophy. Here, Ishvara, in Patanjali system, Ishvara has got a definite meaning. Patanjali, by the word Ishvara, means elevated souls, the highest spiritual yogi, the one who has reached the highest perfection in yoga. If we are devoted to such a transcendental, higher spiritual ideal in the form of Ishvara, then many of the problems that we may have to confront in the practice of yoga can be reduced. In fact, that's why Jung once said, God is a psychological necessity, whether He exists or not. God of the right type, God as properly defined. Otherwise, God can become a source of problem also. Belief in God can be a very serious source of problem if our understanding of God is not correct. So if we can think of a God who is compassionate, who is the creator of this world, who looks upon the whole humanity with love and mercy and compassion and a sense of equality, and if we are devoted to that higher spiritual ideal, then that helps us in whatever task we undertake. Therefore, Patanjali gives 3 methods to achieve the cessation of the misidentification of modifications. That is Abhyasa, Vairagya and devotion to God. In the next sutras, there are long descriptions of what is this Abhyasa. Now, there is a sutra in the 14th. The 14th sutra should be read along with this, though it's not a definition of Abhyasa. Satu dirghakala nairandarya satkara asevito dridhabhumihi. That is the 14th sutra. Satu dirghakala nairandarya satkara asevito dridhabhumihi. So, this Abhyasa gets established when you practice it with simplicity, intensity and continuity. Our goal or idea should be simple. Action should be intense. So, negligence or indifference or lack or kind of negligent attitude without intensity and without continuity cannot help us to go forward. Therefore, for a long time, we should be able to practice with intensity. At the same time, continuity. Nairandarya means without any break. Continuity and intensity. We practice without any break. All these are possible only if we have great love for the task that we have undertaken. So a great intense desire for attaining the goal in yoga, spiritual perfection, spiritual illumination. A great joy in trying to achieve that goal. All these are essential for Abhyasa to be effective. So in the 14th Sutra, Patanjali describes Abhyasa as continued intense practice of these qualities. Of course, this should be read along with the 12th verse. That's why I read this stage. Now, we are coming to the 13th verse. Tatra sthido yatnaha abhyasaha. Here is again a clear definition of what abhyasa is. For reaching the highest cessation of mental modifications, to reach this nirodha of vrittis, modifications, that is called abhyasa. Nirodha also should be explained properly and should be understood properly. Nirodha doesn't mean complete negation or dissolution of mental faculties. So sometimes when we read Patanjali Yoga Sutra translations, you find cessation of modifications. That's the meaning here. Cessation of modifications. It should be understood as cessation of our misidentification with the modifications emerging in the mind. Normally in our life, we identify ourselves with whatever we see or hear or touch or smell. All these objects and all these experiences related to these objects are momentary. But we forget the momentariness. And for a time, we identify ourselves with whatever happens in front of us. That's why we get angry and depressed. The reason why we become angry beyond the limit is we think this unhappy or unpleasant, undesirable experience is a permanent, eternal phenomenon. That misunderstanding is at the root of anger or depression. We become terribly unhappy because for a moment we believe that this unhappy experience, we believe that is eternal, permanent, and we forget that it is only a momentary. Happiness or unhappiness, good and bad, come and go. They emerge, they move in cycles. But for a moment, we forget this impermanent nature of these momentary experiences. And we identify ourselves with these objects. That's why we become depressed. If a problem appears to be a great crisis, and people commit suicide sometimes. People lose their balance of mind. When stock markets fail, collapse, when they lose their job, or when their near and dear ones die, people get depressed. They become terribly unhappy. Because they are able to see only that momentary phenomenon. And they forget that it is momentary. They misunderstand, they misinterpret this unhappy episode as something everlasting, something permanent. And then they identify themselves with that experience. That's the thing. That's called misidentification of a sense of self with the modifications that emerge in mind. So that should be the real meaning that we should understand from the definition of yoga. Yoga chitta vritti nirodha. If you understand yoga means cessation of all mental modifications, you can't live. You try to kill all mental thought currents. You will not be able to do anything creative. Because all great discoveries, all useful activities, all creative faculties first emerge as an idea in mind. And then that idea becomes strong when we ponder over that idea, contemplate on that idea. The idea becomes strong, intense. And then we start trying to implement that idea. That's how great things are accomplished in science, art, literature, everywhere. Also in our daily life. So we should not imagine that yoga means, or nirodha of chittavrittis, or cessation of mental modifications, means killing or negating or dissolving all modifications. If anybody sincerely tries for that, there is a problem that he may end up being a moron or become inactive. Actually, nirodha is called progressive expansion of a perception of the supreme reality. Gradual, progressive expansion, elevation, sublimation of the mind stuff, mental system. Then what comes to an end? What undergoes the process of cessation? That should be understood, because nirodha means ni plus rudh dhatu. That's a verbal root in Sanskrit. So rudh means stopping, cessation, dissolving, coming to an end, blocking, and so on. Ni is a upasarga or a prefix that is added before the verbal root. It means down. So the literal meaning can be interpreted as cessation. That is true. But cessation of what? Cessation of this misidentification with the emerging modifications emerging in the mental system as the senses and mind come in contact with different objects. So when we see an object, when we have an experience, a visual experience, the mental stuff completely takes the form of that object. That's why a painter is able to draw a picture. A painter goes to art gallery in the morning. In the evening, he may start trying to paint a similar picture. Why? Because in his mind, the picture is alive and he's bringing it out. So his mind has taken the form of that picture. So also sound. You learn a song this morning and you try to practice it maybe after 2 years, if you are a good musician. You can do that. You are able to re-experience the previous experience of hearing that song. So your mind has completely taken the modifications, the vrittis, coming out of the audio experience of listening to the song. So also all experiences involving the 5 senses of perception and mind. You can even smell. You smell a beautiful flower, perfume flower in the morning, and evening when we sit alone in our room, we'll be re-experiencing the same thing. All this means mind for the time being takes the form of whatever visual, sensory experiences we get. Means mind takes the form of modifications, vrittis, which emerge in the citta. When the citta comes in contact with external objects through any of the 5 senses of perception or action. Now, in the case of a musician or a painter, this may be a blessing. But what about those who can never forget unhappy events, experiences in their life? In the Gita, there is a statement that memory and also the skill to forget are gifts from God. Matta smritir jnanam apohanam cha. In the 15th chapter, Purushottama Yoga, the 15th chapter, Gita, Lord Krishna says, from me alone emerges not only the skill to remember, but also the gift of forgetfulness. If we don't forget things, we can't live in this world. In fact, our survival, physical and psychological survival, very much depends upon our ability to forget and also the ability to remember. Both are necessary. So, what Patanjali says is, what happens when we achieve cessation of vrittis is this. The mind constantly taking the forms of emerging modifications, that is chitta vrittis in mind, that come to an end. Which means we will be able to go beyond that stage. We will be able to look at these different modifications not as a participant but as a witness. There's a great difference between a participant in a drama and a witness. If you are a witness, you can sit in an armchair in an air-conditioned room. Many people drink Coca-Cola and watch the drama going on. But the players on the stage, they're struggling because their profession depends upon their performance. So if you are a participant, then you are miserable, you are unhappy, you are in a constant state of afflictions, according to the language of Patanjali. Afflictions is what we call klesha. But if you are a participant, then you can witness the drama sitting on an armchair. Suppose we can be witness of the drama of our own life. That's the purpose of yoga. If we can become a witness of our own life, which means a mind not misidentifying itself with the emerging vrittis, modifications, then life becomes easy. But it's not an easy task to achieve this, because you try to think and immediately mind starts misidentifying itself in different objects. When we sit for some time, different visual, audio objects that we have experienced in the past suddenly re-emerge in the mind. That is true as much for an Einstein as for any ordinary person. A yogi is different from an Einstein or a Bertrand Russell. Remember that. We have to remember that. The greatest philosophers and scientists also have to identify themselves with the emerging vrittis. Yogi alone can stand apart and remain as a witness. The purpose of yoga is to become a witness and to stop being a participant. When you are a participant in the drama of life, every moment our chittam, mind stuff, misidentifies itself with the emerging modifications. It identifies itself with the momentary visual, audio experiences and objects. Then when we become a witness, when we reach yoga state, then our own mind itself becomes an object of which we are the subject. Mind itself becomes a scene and we become the seer. But right now, we are identifying ourselves with the mind stuff, and mind chittam is identifying all the time with different visual objects. So this comes to an end only when we are able to stop this problem of misidentification with the emerging modifications. So this should be clearly understood. Nirodha it never means dissolution or negation of all mental faculties. If people start practicing yoga, let me kill all my mental ideas, everything, and try to make my mind empty. There are two possibilities. One possibility, that person will soon realize that this is absolutely meaningless and he will stop doing it, which is a happy state of affairs. The more dangerous possibility is that he may go ahead and can end up being a psychological problem. Because we can never identify ourselves with a void. It's impossible. So, that is the real implication of this sutra, Abhyasa Vairagyabhyam Tad Nirodha. So if you practice Abhyasa, intense continued practice, accompanied with Vairagya, then we will reach the goal. That's why Vairagya is clearly emphasized by Patanjali. The Vairagya should be understood as the fundamental moral principles and ideas, ethical principles and ideas, which should be kept in mind all the time when we do practice. Because Abhyasa without Vairagya can be counterproductive. But Abhyasa with Vairagya, repeated practice with moral foundation, can take us to the highest goal. Tatra sthito yatnaha abhyasaha. So Abhyasa is this effort, continued, constant, intense effort to stop this misidentification of our sense of self with modifications. 14th Sutra should be taken again because it requires a longer explanation. Satu dirghakala nairantarya satkara asevito dridhabhumihi. Saha dirghakala nairantarya satkara asevitaha. Dridhabhumi. This is the prose order. So this effort, it should be long till we reach the goal. And there should be no break, nairantarya. Which means we must have concentration, purity of life, and intense faith, plus a love, respect for the ideal that we have taken up. This is very, very important. If we can love the work that we have taken up, then there is less strain. We will not be able to continue any kind of spiritual practice unless we have great love and devotion to what we have undertaken. Because the strain, the effort, the intensity, all these will sometimes produce fatigue. This fatigue can be neutralized when we take up any work with a love and affection. So a mother never gets tired of looking after her child. At least she should not get tired. She is not expected to get tired of looking after her babies because she loves them. So we never get tired of what we really love to do. It's impossible. We get tired of only what we try to do when we don't have much attachment, much affection for that work. And this 15th sutra is very important. It is a well-known sutra in this in Patanjali system. It describes, it clearly defines what is meant by vairagyam. That is a long description. That is the 15th sutra we are taking up. Drishta anusravika vishaya vitrishnasya vashikara samjna vairagyam. Vairagyam or renunciation, the moral ideas are explained. Vairagyam can be defined as renunciation in the highest sense. But there are 3 different levels till we reach that kind of renunciation as indicated in this particular sutra. See, one point we have to remember. We cannot, it's called, eat the, we cannot have omelette and eggs together, You cannot have omelette without breaking the eggs, something like that. Something should be got rid of. See, it's not possible to have both. So, it is in the old Sanskrit philosophical books, it is called, Ardhakukshinyaya, means you cannot cut a hen into 2 pieces. One piece you keep in the fridge so that it will lay an egg next day morning, and the other piece you eat today. Both cannot be possible. If you eat it, you have to eat full. You won't have the other one. You cannot have both. So yoga demands and requires some giving up. You have to pay price for it. Not in terms of money, but in terms of giving up the lower when we have a desire for the higher. Without giving up the lower levels of human aspirations, we can never have higher aspirations. We can never fulfill higher aspirations. That's the implication of this. So drishta actually means what is obvious. See, some objects of desire that we readily get, or some objects due to our own experience, some experiences within our own level, within our own range. And anusavika means experiences coming from others. Or maybe reading from books. From reading books, from listening to other people, and also from our own experiences, we may develop a desire for certain things in this world. In this world, things of momentary nature. So that desire should be given up. What is eternal and what is non-eternal? A proper discerning mind, what you call discriminating mind. The first condition, Vedanta, and also in yoga. So, the first condition in achieving vairagya or the higher renunciation is giving up desire for material objects, material pleasures that are within our own level of experience, and also what we get from reading books, what is not obvious. But if we know that we may achieve certain things if we practice, that also should be given up. And finally, we get a strong conviction, I am not an instrument in the hands of these desires. These desires and objects of desires, all these are instruments in my hands. The Patanjali's commentators have explained this in detail. We will describe this in the next class. So today we have about 10 minutes for interaction. So you can raise whatever topics need interaction or further detailed description, explanation. Any general topic can take. Any.
Swamiji, what is the difference between samskara and vasana?
Yes, vasanas are related to samskaras. Our vasanas are natural tendency to do certain things. Natural tendency to do certain things or not to do certain things. They are related to samskaras. Samskaras are the subtle residual element. The subtlest portion of whatever we have done in the past, which becomes vrittis or tendencies. From tendencies, certain natural propensities are created. They are samskaras. Our vasanas are the external expressions of samskaras. Samskaras may not necessarily be visible or obvious. But our vasanas, natural tendencies and propensities to do certain things, will reveal what samskaras we have accomplished. Samskaras are subtler, vasanas are the visible manifestations of samskaras. So the way children behave in a classroom, if you observe intensely, if you subject that experience or subtle analysis, you'll be able to understand a lot about the natural propensities of children. Children will have a vasana for learning music. So that when they listen to something, they go on repeating the whole day. Natural tendency, you find. But if they repeatedly show this fascination, it means there is a corresponding samskaras latent. That comes to the surface. So samskaras are subtle, vasanas are visible, manifested forms. That's the idea behind. Okay. Please.
Is samskara, is it a sort of discipline given to the children right from the beginning? That do this, don't do that, it's not good, and we get the way you're brought up. That makes you samskara?
No. Samskaras do not necessarily come from this life experiences. Samskaras may be coming from previous lives. Strong behavior patterns, which cannot necessarily be explained in the light of the prevailing atmosphere in homes. We have to seek their source elsewhere. They come from another source. But Patanjali makes it a very important point that is very rational, and maybe it's a lesson for modern psychologists. He says, samskaras do not make us helpless tools in the hands of samskaras. Samskaras actually is a great help. Samskaras can be modified, can be corrected through counter samskaras. That is an important contribution of Patanjali's yoga system. So a person cannot be blamed for what he is doing. It's because he is a system, he is a mechanism of samskaras that he has accumulated in the past. And these samskaras come from certain actions that the person may have performed in the past. Those actions are responsible for these samskaras. That means these samskaras can be modified through actions. So Patanjali makes an important point. Every samskaras can be countered, modified. Their intensity can be reduced with the help of consciously practicing opposite samskaras. People with certain tendencies, undesirable tendencies, can be corrected if we can tell them you consciously try to practice the opposite type of actions. Law of karma doesn't make us helpless tools in the hands. In fact, we can be the makers of our own destiny. That's the real implication of samskaras. Samskaras can be modified by consciously trying to do that. In the beginning there will be resistance. But once we try to continue doing it, as we continue doing that, the resistance will be reduced. Because the positive samskaras get more and more enriched. And to that extent, the resistance to positive activities will be reduced. That's the idea behind. So please.
Could you discuss more about the need to renounce ideas from books?
Oh, yes. Of course, drishta anusravika. Anusravam actually means Vedas or scriptures or books, good books. Anusravika means that we have heard from others, from books, that we may have listened to some great things which may tempt us, objects of desire, great things to be achieved. So mind may go after that. So we should not be tempted, we should not be shaken by any desire for attaining those objects. That's the meaning of anusravika. We will describe this in the next class again. Lot more description required. Any other? If ideas are not clear, you are free to ask questions. This 10 minutes meant for that. Many ideas may be new, and
Swami, I think I heard you say that one should not have attachment to themselves as the individual, but play to play as a manifestation of the higher. How does one really have a relationship with themselves without a certain amount of attachment and be willing to play the game?
yes, at that time, of course, mentally we must try to understand this, and then the attachment will become very binding. That's the idea behind. If we try some kind of attachment for the sake of work and for practical activities in the world, but at the same time if we are real practitioners of yoga, and if we understand this principle, then we will be able to be attached for day-to-day interactions, but at the same time free from the binding effect of that attachment. Knowledge is power, that's the idea. Once we understand the true nature, then we can practice many things, but at the same time we'll be free from the undesirable effects, binding effects of that attachment. That's the idea behind.
In Swamiji's life, Vivekananda's life, at some point of time, Thakur touched him and he was seeing Chaitanya everywhere. Is that the state of being a witness?
Oh, you see, it's an entirely different topic. In the case of Swami Vivekananda, though he was a student who did not even believe in God, by his very nature and by his accumulated samskaras and impressions in the past, he had already reached a very high level of yoga. That Sri Ramakrishna also remarked. So in his case, there was no need to go through these different disciplines. Patanjali's system will tell us that we start in this life from where we left in the previous life. That's why the so-called geniuses, suddenly people are able to learn and master certain skills, certain branches of learning quickly in a surprisingly efficient manner. It shows that it's only a revision for them. It's only a revision for them. Any kind of higher skill, it is not a play of mind. It only shows that particular jiva, human mechanism, had imbibed his skill sometime in the past. So in this life, he only needs a simple touch, just a superficial reading, and that person will understand the whole implication of an idea or a skill or a branch of learning. In the case of Swami Vivekananda, he had no problem of misidentification with the vrittis of mind. He was a person who could naturally go into meditation, anywhere, anytime. Because all the time, he had the conviction, not the conviction, the real experience that he is not the psychophysical mechanism, a human being born in a particular place, as a son of a particular person. Beyond that, he had the conviction that he belonged to a higher plane. So that enables him to get this experience. This experience won't come to all. To drive home this point, I can just narrate a story from one of the devotional classics called Bhagavata Purana. The story is this: a king had only one son, and it was time for the king to retire, and he wanted to declare his son as the heir apparent, and they had made all preparations. And that day the prince dies, and the queen and the king and all the subjects of the courtiers became terribly upset. And many sages came to console this king and the queen, the father and mother, but they could not console them. And finally a great sage called Narada, the great sage, appeared there. So he tried to console this king. Look here, life and death are only different points in the cycle of human existence. Everyone will have to die and be reborn. And as for your son who died, he must be already reborn now. And he was the son or a daughter of somebody else in the previous life. For this life only, he happened to be born as your son. So why should you get upset by this? But the parents of the prince, for them it was the death of the son. It was a big tragedy. They could not be consoled. Then Narada, I will explain to you. So through his supernatural powers, he said, I shall bring your son back to life for some time. You can test for yourself. So Narada, the great sage, brought back this son, this young prince, to life. He was brought back to life. She got up as if he was asleep. And he was blinking, looking around. Then the great sage told him, look here, why don't you recognize your parents, the courtiers, the ministers, all around? They are so much upset because you died. And look at your parents, your weeping mother, father. And the prince looked around. Which parents? I have so many pairs of parents belonging to the past. I don't recognize them. So then that way the sage could console the parents. They understood that the person who was born to them as their son in this life was the son of some other parents in another life, like that in the past. So, the momentariness of this empirical world, the present day experiences, and the eternal, the everlasting, the imperishable nature of Atman, the supreme consciousness behind all this. They could understand and they stopped crying. Now, for a person like Vivekananda, though he was born as the son of one lawyer in a city, in a family, in a country like that, he had within him the strong conviction that he was a great sage in the past. So that conviction for some time will enable him to look at all these relations as alien. His real home was the place from where he came, the realm of the sages and saints. So of course, that's the explanation. So for Vivekananda, only a touch was necessary. What I am trying to tell you, this is in spiritual realm, but even in ordinary human experience, a great genius, you call a prodigy, a child prodigy who suddenly displays great skills and aptitudes. What we call genius, we call him sometimes child prodigy. It's because that person has done, for him it is only revision. If you take a professor from a university and ask him to learn the alphabet, and if he quickly masters the alphabet, it's not there is no surprise in it. He had already mastered and he's coming back again. So when these samskaras are very strong in the system, babies and children, even from their birth, they display these skills. And we foolishly call that this is a special manifestation, a surprise or wonder. No, Patanjali won't be surprised. He says, well, this is nothing but a jiva who has acquired all the skills in the past. After all, who is the son and who is the father? You may be 40 years now. Now, you may, when you look at a 95-year-old, 100-year-old person, he's older than you. But he was a child when you were a 70-year-old man in the previous life. So that's why in Vedantic and Yogic system, existence and life is analyzed in a cycle, not at a straight line progression. You start from one point, you finish 100 meters, and there it comes to an end. No. Vedanta says existence is not in a straight line progression. Death is not a full stop, it is only comma, and this cycle continues till we realize our true nature. So that's the idea behind it. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.